quick break. Today I am joined by Lauren from ReadsandDaydreams.
Hello.
And I thought Lauren would be the perfect person to answer a little question for me that I think you might like to hear the answer to too.
That's a big amount of pressure.
No pressure, no pressure. It's just, you'll be blacklisted from the internet if you're wrong. So what we're going to talk about is literary fiction. What is literary fiction? Do you like literary fiction? Is literary fiction for you? Is it intimidating? All of the big questions, really.
All of the big stuff, yeah.
Really.
Well, this is what I read predominantly. Like,
Yeah.
I think whenever people ask what kind of genre, what types of books do you like reading, I often say, well, I don't know. I don't like reading books specifically about a certain part of the world or a certain topic. I'm just like, well, if it's written well, then I like it and I want to read more of it. And so that's to me what literary fiction is.
So it's to do with the writing.
Yeah, I would. It's quite a hard thing to define.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've tried to do this. We've been looking up definitions. We've asked people for how they define it, and it is a tricky one to define.
Yeah, well, it's difficult because it's just literary fiction, but something can be a certain genre and also be described as literary fiction as well. Yeah. Because it's more about the writing style. I mean, like for me, I would say a book is literary fiction if the thing that defines it is the writing style, and that's what we're going in for. It's not about the plot. It doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of plot in that book, but it's much more to do with the writing style and the author than it is about the plot. So you can get some books which are basically about nothing. Yeah, that's when I first started reading literary fiction. I was like, what is this book about though? Like,
it fits into nothing else.
Yeah, it's not really about anything. It's just more about ponderings about life.
Yeah, and like humanity and kind of like how people function inside. Just like a bit of a deeper look into people.
Yeah, it's more
like studying.
It's more.
But that doesn't necessarily, I think all of that does make it sound quite intimidating.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
But it's not. It's actually a really diverse range of books.
Yeah.
And there's probably something in there for you.
I think as well, like, there's some things like, for example, the Man Booker Prize, and there's stuff which is awards, which is for literary fiction, and that's for a very specific, very impressive style of writing. Yeah. And that can be very intimidating, definitely. Yeah. But I think probably, even if you wouldn't class yourself as a literary fiction reader, I would say there's probably lots of books that you've read that are actually literary fiction and are also very readable and very easy to get on
and
with.
we'll talk about some of those in this video. Yeah. First, let's see what people said that they thought literary fiction was, because I think the answers that people have been sending us in on Twitter are fascinating.
Yeah, everyone's got a really different opinion.
Yeah.
So one person says, some of my friends would say the more boring, the more literary, but I would say the more insightful. And I think that's very
goes along with philosophical.
Yeah, definitely. But I get why people would say boring, because some literary fiction books aren't just like, you know, plot, action. Yeah.
I don't like all literary fiction, but I love some of it, because some topics are not of interest to me, and that's fine. Yeah. Because you probably don't either love or hate all literary fiction. Yeah. And then somebody else said that it's a book that makes you think and entertains you, rather than a book that just entertains you, which I like.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's literary fiction does have an element of entertainment. It's not a textbook. Yeah. It's not a university or school textbook.
I think most people are introduced to it like in school as well. Yeah. Most people are like, you know, when they're reading Of Mice and Men or reading stuff at school or A-levels or university, and it's all books that you can study. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it has to be boring.
I suppose that's another way of defining it, is it's something that you can enjoy just like any other book, but there's something beneath the surface that if you wanted to sit down and analyse it, you could really get something from it.
Yeah, but you don't have to. Like,
no. Yeah, totally.
So we've also got, I'd say, books that don't fit into any specific genre are beautifully written and make you think about the world. So I like that. I think that's a really good definition.
Books are innovative and push the boundaries of what fiction can do. I like that. You can be really experimental. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Ali Smith, Jeanette Winterson, their writing's quite experimental.
Books then take themselves very seriously. Not always.
Is there any literary comedy? I would be intrigued to know.
Would you suppose that the Howard Jacobson?
I've never read any Howard Jacobson.
I've never read any Howard Jacobson, but he's been shortlisted and won the Man Booker Prize several times for funny books.
Okay, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily have thought of that. Comedy and literary fiction go on aside one another, but I would assume a book that won the Man Booker was literary.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it is. Yeah. I've not read it, but I know that when it did win, everyone was like, wow, this is quite a big thing for the Man Booker Prize.
Probably fiction marketed to adults doesn't fit neatly into a bookshop genre, e.g. crime, romance. It's what separates those books that aren't fantasy, that aren't science fiction, and you don't know where else to put them.
Yeah, it's not genre fiction, it's just fiction. Yeah. And then I guess
But we have a few things that would fit into both.
We do.
And quite a lot of people in general seem to think there's an implied difficulty or even superiority in writing, so difficult to read.
Yeah, and I think that's hopefully what we're sort of here to debunk today, because there's definitely some things you can read. I have some recommendations for stuff if you're just starting to get into literary fiction, and the books that I started reading, which kind of got me into writing style more so than plot.
Yeah.
But just don't read the pretentious ones, like it's fine.
Ulysses.
Yeah, don't start with Ulysses.
So shall we talk about a few specific books then?
Yes. So my first pick is Kate Morton as an author, and I remember when I first started reading her, I think she's did a lot of good holiday reads. The first book of hers that I read was The House of Riverton, and then The Forgotten Garden is the second one. She was very good at, it's definitely literary fiction, but it's very much more like mystery, like family mystery, undercovering things that's happened. Yeah. It's sort of historical fiction as well, a lot of it. But I definitely think that was a bridge for me between sort of reading children's fiction into adult fiction and kind of getting into adult style.
Someone I always think that is very readable and people don't necessarily think of as literary fiction because she's become kind of mainstream is Emma Donoghue. Because obviously Room had its film adaptation, everybody saw it, everybody loved it, and because people enjoyed that, they don't necessarily think, oh, that must be a really intimidating read.
Yeah.
Which is quite good, breaking down the stigma a little bit. But I would definitely consider Emma Donoghue's Room a book that falls under literary fiction.
Exactly, because it's a completely different style and she's playing with what fiction should be.
Yeah.
Because you've got the perspective of a child. I think it's very similarly with something like A Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. A lot of people read that, and when it becomes mainstream, people kind of think, oh, that's not...
It stops being literary, but
it isn't. Yeah, of course it is.
And we also mentioned that plot isn't necessarily the main thing.
Yeah.
It can be a part of a literary novel, but something that is a part of some literary fiction is that it doesn't need a plot. So something like A Whole Life by Robert Seethaler, which is essentially just about one man.
Yeah, and even then, although stuff happens in his life, it's more like you're just following him sort of up to his death, really. He just lives in this little town in the mountains, and that's that.
In a way, that's all of us, isn't it? We don't all have we don't all go to wizarding school. These are quite relatable.
Yeah, these are normal people doing normal things. Yeah, that's what I like about literary fiction. I think it's very internal. A lot of it is about this character's life or these characters' lives, and it's very normal. Yeah, but it kind of brings something out of that ordinariness. So I think a tip from me would be, if you're not into literary fiction and you want to get into it, is to try and find an author that you really like. Because I think that's when you start noticing writing styles. Yeah. So some authors that I think are so readable, but also their books are really quite far-reaching. I like Margaret Atwood, who's written The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale is a very sort of straightforward, easy book to get into, as a first Margaret Atwood.
She writes dystopian, she writes historical, she writes contemporary, she writes crime, but they're all literary. That's what defines them.
Exactly. I would say she is almost like one on her own. Actually, it's her writing style, which is the thing, and not really what she's writing about. But there's a lot of kind of science fiction-y, dystopian stuff that she does. Once I read more of her work, you kind of recognise her style. Yes. And you're like, oh, okay, this is an author I like. Somebody else whose style I really like is also Sarah Waters. The first book of hers I read was Fingersmith, which I would absolutely recommend. It's amazing. And that's historical crime, sort of mystery thrillers, and also LGBTQ stuff as well. Amazing. But apart from all of that stuff, which makes it really readable and really interesting, her writing style is really good. Yeah. And again, I've read all of her work now, because it's just you find someone you like, and then you read through her back catalogue.
Another place that is very well known for picking out pieces of literary fiction are literary prizes and things like the Man Booker Prize or Costa or Bailey's. I mean, especially the Man Booker. Yeah. So one of the ones that was so popular in 2015 was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, which is a literary fiction novel, but it was so popular and so many people loved it.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start. I think you can get intimidated quite easily by the Man Booker Prize, I would say, especially the ones that win often. I think some of the more the Costa Book Awards are a really good place to look at. The Bailey's shortlist is a really good place to start.
Yeah, one of the ones that was longlisted for the Baileys this year was Little Deaths, which is a crime novel. But lots of people are calling it a literary crime novel.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you like crime.
And also for me, there's someone who doesn't really like crime, or I don't read a lot of it as genre fiction. I would definitely read that because it's been longlisted and it's defined as a literary book.
So what have we established?
We've established that literary fiction is basically anything.
Anything.
And if there's any genre of book that you like, there's probably a literary version of that kind of genre.
And that's quite a good in.
Yeah. it's just, you just need to do a little bit of research. I know it can be a bit scary, like if you are used to reading genre fiction or YA, for example, and you want to kind of get into more adult fiction. You just go into a bookshop and it's just fiction.
Yeah.
And that's it, and there's kind of no pathway for you to find out a book that you like. But I think if you start with some of these authors that we've mentioned, they're all very readable ones, and I think that's the key. Once you start getting into that readable fiction, it will help you in your journey.
Well, I hope you found that as interesting as we did to think about. I think it's something as well there's never going to be a definitive answer to.
It's quite a difficult question. It's just a broad question. What is literary fiction? Like,
I think though what people tend to have though is that a very narrow idea of literary fiction, and I hope what we've done is show that it's actually much broader than you might have expected. And there's lots of good things in there to get your teeth into, so don't pass it by too quickly. Let us know if you have any favourite pieces of fiction that you would consider literary in the comments down below, especially stuff that you perhaps didn't go into expecting it to be literary fiction. In the meantime, don't forget to check out Lauren's channel if you want more recommendations of lots of awesome classics, literary fiction, and a few other things too. So lots of surprises to be found.
So yes, some surprises.
Your diversity there.
Bits and bobs.
Yeah, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you all again next week. Bye!
Bye!